We're back. Welcome to Print Your Games, the podcast for the people who love the magic printer that makes our pile of shame grow ever larger. I'm one of your hosts,
Boy, does
Jefferson
it.
J. Thacker, also known as Param, and I'm joined by.
Kristen Sowers, also known as Lost Spheres.
And today we are here to talk about several exciting things. One, supporting miniatures, why you have to, how to do it, and why pre-supports are kind of great sometimes and not great when they don't work. After that,
And
we've
to
got
clarify, we don't
Mhm.
mean supporting them like nurturing their emotional welfare
No,
or whatever.
but
We
that's
mean,
what the Facebook groups are for.
yes. Sometimes both.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, the answer to most questions on the support on the Facebook groups is you need more supports.
Yep, almost always. Or
Yeah.
you did that angle wrong. And
Level your bed. Level your
Yeah.
bed.
I remember early on it was shake your resin, but I think that's dying down because I'm actually kind of thinking more and more as your plate goes down in there, it's mixing it up nicely. Shaking your resin helps.
Shaking resin is super important.
Okay, well there you go.
Yeah. Okay. Do shake your resin, stir your resin. You can cheat and use the build plate and just go home, up, home,
Right.
Churn that butter.
Churn
Hello,
the butter.
Alex. Thanks for joining us. And of course, after the topic in the news, we've got some fun, exciting things to talk about. 3D Printing Pro's year-long VROOM test, which is definitively going to tell us, is it safe to vroom your printers or will you break it terribly? Hint, it's safe. Because it is safe. Then after that, we've got a brand new printer from Elegoo. The new version of the Saturn is coming out. And of course, other news that we wish to chime in on, as well as the releases we love so much. Alex says, I can't shake resin. Shaking filament doesn't do anything useful. It does
not give you a nice rhythm.
Okay. But for filament, the phrase is dry your filament.
Dry your filament. Okay.
Yes. Which is honestly mostly a myth if you're printing PLA. If you're printing nylon, it makes a big difference. But PLA, like they've done some printing tests. I saw Makers News do a printing test on it where they literally soaked the filament in water for hours and then printed with it, and it printed fine. But if you are using like nylon or other not PLA filaments, then drying those stuff out actually is important, or else you can pop hiss and stuff.
Why would you use nylon versus the PLA, at least in our lane?
It depends on the properties you want your model to have. For little plastic people, not a lot of reason to use nylon. But if you want something that's going to be super durable, like something that needs to be like a handle for a hammer or something like that, then that's when you would want nylon or ABS or other filaments that are
so more for the props / light cosplay aspects of the gaming stuff.
Yeah. The nylon has a little bit of flex to it. It's a lot more durable. It can handle higher temperatures. If anybody who has printed something in PLA, like a nice house that I have printed, and then you prime it and you leave it out into the sun to dry for the primer, and you forget about it for a couple of hours, and you come back and realize that house doesn't fit together like it used to because it warped. PLA is wonderful material. I recommend that most people printing models use PLA. It's cheap. It's easy to work with. It makes great details. It's perfect for our uses, but it will melt at a lower temperature. You leave that thing in your car and suddenly you have the leaning tower of elfdom instead of the straight tower of elfdom.
Hopefully that doesn't give people headed to conventions too much of a headache.
It can. So do take precautions if you are transporting PLA printed materials. Absolutely, for sure.
Do you think the foam would like a mini case foam would help, or would it not be enough?
Just avoid direct sunlight and stuff like that. Like anything that would melt a Fisher Price toy, if like leaving it in the mirror, avoid that. But yeah, like in your trunk while you're driving with the air conditioner on, there's things like that. That's fine. Just don't leave it in the car when you park it in a Walmart parking lot and melt it. Alex Shriver says PTG is tough and durable. Yes, in almost all cases that you would want to use ABS, PTG is the better choice. It does require higher printing temperatures, and some printers like the Elegoo Neptune 2, which I love to death, have a hard time getting that hot to handle the PTG stuff. But though I do know lots of people that have printed PTG on the Neptune too.
So the PTG thing is just a different type of plastic, or is it something
Yes.
different?
Yeah, it's a different plastic material that you can feed into the printer that is a lot more durable, a lot more tough. It's like you could print car parts in like that, or going like engine shrouds and stuff like that. If you're printing like RC cars that you intend to go race with, PTG is a great material for that.
And then the
in a lot of
TPU
cases, it's great.
that
Huh?
they say is too squishy. Alex says TPU is too squishy or squishy.
No,
What
it
is
is
that?
squishy. It
What
is.
is
You
it?
can make squishy things. You can print things that go squish if you
Are they
want something to be
is it
that flexible.
rubbery, or is it
Yeah.
just okay?
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah.
I just know that I am ignorant, and so
Mhm.
maybe somebody listening to us might be ignorant about that.
And there's filaments that are wood. There's filaments that have metal in them and all kinds of cool stuff. The FDM world really is spoiling us with all the cool materials that you can print things in, and it is fun. But different materials all have different settings that they need, and different printers handle them better. But for modelers and gamers and stuff, PLA is just the best stuff to use in general, for
I will
sure.
probably be asking more and more questions about this, hopefully shortly.
Right. And as we get going, I'm curious to know first, why isn't my thing muted? It is muted. Why am I hearing do noises? Interesting. It might be my actual phone making do-doots. Sorry about that, gang. Printing ochre jelly and gelatinous cubes in TPU. Oh, okay. Yes, great choice there, Alex. I do love that concept. Now, but while we're talking about, before we get to talking about what we how we our main topic supports, let's talk a little bit about what we're printing right now. What are you printing right now, Kristen? Because I'm printing nothing because it's the holiday season and I've been too busy to make my printers work for me.
All right. Well, people who listened to last episode might have known that I dropped a whole tray of Owlkin that I was celebrating Strixhaven / holiday stuff with. And so I've been rebuilding those and reprinting a couple of them, and been painting them up for a happy Holiday theme. Yeah, we're making progress, especially considering I believe this is one of the guys that was in several pieces earlier this week. So, but yeah, so they're kind of lightly holiday themed. Still trying to keep them cool to play with, just in case. Like I said, kind of celebrating Strixhaven a little bit too.
I did not quite get the Holiday joke pun when you were typing it out to me, because I didn't read it out loud. But the second I saw this owl barbarian awesomeness that you posted up, that you have Christmas the heck out with gold, green, and red, I got it immediately. It's like, oh, Santa's bringing some feathered badass with him this year.
That was the idea. Yep. And I'm trying to encourage people. One thing, I'm not going to get too into it, but Strixhaven is super favoritive of spellcasting classes, and I still want people to consider playing some of the core classes. And if Dave said that the Alkin looks awesome, yeah, it's from Clay Cyanide's Patreon. It's a little bit a ghost. You can still get it on my mini factory. So
nice.
Other than that, I've been printing up some terrain. It did not get printed because holiday stuff, but I have more for the Forest Army that I'm working on, the Dryad Fairy Army thing. And then I've been planning, just in case I get a large FDM sized package sometime from Santa or some holiday individual, that I'm working on some gates that hopefully I'll be printing and maybe even painting before the next episode. We'll see.
Ooh, fantastic. Depends
Everybody
on how good of a boy you've been this year.
Yes, exactly. Everybody who knows me knows that I love planar stuff, though, and portals and gates of all sizes and shapes are kind of like something that are a staple at my table. So,
right. Alex in chat is saying that they are working on some Space Hulk tiles from Digital Taxidermy. That sounds fun and something I will want to look into, because I've always wanted to play Space Hulk, but it's definitely a situation where that game only comes out every so often, It's a limited print run, and then getting old sets of it is like pulling teeth. It's insanely expensive to go get old sets of Space Hulk, and also little cardboard tiles not as impressive with you these cool printed minis. I want that 3D look, and I know lots of people have done digital Space Hulk tiles, just like lots of people have done Hero Quest
Yep.
tiles. So I've been one that, and also, while I'm not printing anything right now, I do have some printing projects, and I think I finally got the grimdark bug has bit me, and a little bit related to some of the shout outs I'm going to give later on, and I kind of want to do some 40K printing, or do some specifically, more likely, some grimdark future printing, because I
I
do
did.
like that rule set.
I did not expect you to join me as a fan of that thing, so I'm glad we're going to be talking about it later because
Yes.
I jumped in there. That's actually where that curing station came from, but we'll talk about it more later.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I've been having fun, and that is definitely on the topic. But the main topic for today is not how grimdark I'm gonna get, or how that Elegoo curing station mysticized into your life. It is indeed supporting models. If there's anything that you need to know about 3D printing, is that eventually you're going to want to print something that needs to be supported. And why do you even need to support models? Well, the truth is that the build plate isn't magic. And there are some printers that print without supports, that like beam laser beams into dusts of solid steel powders and then fuse them together and then make the parts. We don't have those in our houses.
Mm-mm.
Most people don't. Your average resin printer is going to use a build plate system that peels one layer at a time out of a build vat. And in order for that to work really well for you, you're going to need to support models, because you can't print something in mid-air. So everything needs to eventually connect to the build plate. And occasionally with models with cool dynamic poses and arms out and weapons and spears, oh my gosh, it's always the spears. You need to support the elements that would not that it would try to print in midair, that are called islands, where it's like a downward facing part of the model that doesn't have anything of the model itself underneath it to hold it up.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not
So
going to
you
just start because there's nothing holding that there. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of things, like if you're used to like traditional models, think of your supports like you would think of the sprue, that the models that you buy in stores, because they serve a similar purpose. The sprues help the liquid plastic get to the parts of the model that it needs to get to, and the supports on resin models help the, well, gravity or peel force from
Physics.
physics. It helps the physics work. Otherwise you get like floating chunks of plastic that then puncture your resin vat, and then just you have a bad day. It's not a great time. So how do you support models, and why do you support models? That's what we're here to talk about. If you're lucky, and most Patreons do offer pre-supported models, you can use, and when your printer is tuned in and they're good support, you can just slap those models on the build plate and you know they're going to print.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I have noticed there are reasons why you wouldn't do that. We'll probably talk about that at some point.
Lots of reasons why you would want to support your own models. Absolutely. But one thing's, if you're new to resin printing, like if it's from a reputable, model maker company, we're talking your Artisan Guild, your Titan Forges, anybody that Atlas supports, are servicing a surprising number of the Patreons. There's a company called Atlas Support Services that literally, it's a company that just goes to these other artist companies, makes the support files for them, and then that's what the company gives to you when you download your monthly package.
Right. I've definitely noticed a lot of the creatives behind our Patreons that we like don't necessarily paint, and they don't necessarily do their supports. They just sculpt and are just free to create, and then they give it to somebody like an expert like Atlas, and they handle the physics,
Right.
which is beautiful.
Right. Now, the pre-supported files, sometimes they won't work. Now, we will say that, like for most of the companies, the supported files are great, but you do need to tune your printer in first, which is when you would print So the supported files are set at a baseline that if a printer is tuned this well, these supports have been tested to work, and they do test across most of the major printers, your Elegoo Marses and Saturns and Anycubics and the Enders, any of the major brands, they do test across these. The reputable ones do test across all these different printers to make sure that these files, these pre-supported files, will indeed print successfully. I will also say, if you are going to use the pre-supported files, do it towards the end of the month and not the beginning when they first come out, because there's always one or two that is just like, we had to patch this one. People are having problems with this one on this and such printer. And by the end of the month, they've all that solved. But that's neither here nor there. Like, you know, prints, you will have print failures eventually on every printer. There's printing is
pre-supported or not. Yeah.
Printing is always amble, which with a high chance of success, but never 100% chance of success. And when you lose that dice roll, you just have to clean up. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. You know, I would throw out a couple reasons why you would consider not using the pre-supports. One of them that a lot of people don't think about is time. Right. Sometimes pre-supports are oriented to support physics and not to support, I have 2 hours before I have to get this thing out and paint it.
Yeah. Like they love to model, like I mentioned, spears and pikes or lances from mounted dudes with the lances pointed straight up to the sky. This print's going to take 9 hours because
9 hours.
One tip of that flagpole is way up in the stratosphere.
Here's a huge-sized storm giant with an uplifted lightning cresting sword, and it's 8 inches tall.
Right.
And it's vertical, where if you split him in half and laid him down on your plate, you might be able to get him out in a few hours. So, other thing that I've noticed is sometimes those supports have very interesting conformations on their platform. So, like sometimes they'll have like a lip or something that is very, very large. And if you're trying to, like, because you're in a time crunch or whatever, you're trying to just jam your build plate full, sometimes those lips can be very wonky. And you either need to spin them or cut them or whatever. And if you do that, you might mess up the supports. So, you know, that might be a case to do an auto or self-support situation, maybe.
Right. So the reasons that I do my own supports, and I do my own supports more often than not, actually, is I want to rescale a model. Now, a lot of models are provided at 32 millimeter scale or 28 millimeter scale, which are fairly common ones. And I want them to match the size of all my other models that I play with. So the second you rescale a model, some supports can handle it. If you're just doing tiny amounts of scaling, oftentimes, more often than not, you'll get away with it. I know for a fact, Artisan Guild printed at 90% with their supports prints most of the time on my printer, no problem. Because they have nice beefy supports. Sometimes I can't get away with that same trick on Titan's Forge because they go extra fine with their supports and produces wonderful looking models at normal scale. But when I scale it down, like those supports aren't enough, which is why thank you again, Titan Forge, for providing them in 28 millimeter scale as an option from now on. That was a wonderful touch. I appreciate that.
I do like when they have that option for sure, because it takes a second if you're going to go and scrap it and do it. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. No, but one of the things that another reason I do want to do my own supports is when I customize a model. The second you start kit bashing a model or pre-assembling all the modular parts into the configurations you want and saving them as one completed model, the supports are gone. The modular models are usually each of the parts are printable and then you glue them together. And one of the reasons I love 3D printing is that I can combine those models and never touch my glue. Because when I do old school model kit, the new Age of Sigmar kit, I got some of those for my younger sibling as a present, and just cutting those out and gluing them together. And oh, it was so much. It was just so much time. I spent more time putting those models together of those Stormcast Eternals than it would have taken me to print models from scratch on my Saturn if I just like
Yeah.
decided to get not Stormcast from.
But you don't miss that like super glue all over your fingertips and everything.
Oh well, thankfully it is GW, so they use PVC, so I was able to use
Right. Use the
that
actual
plastic instead.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
plastic fusing stuff.
Indeed.
Brett says Lychee has an option to recalculate sports. I think we'll be talking about that possibly in a second.
Indeed. I need to practice that more because I do often find that I need to beef up supports on my Saturn because the Saturn is a little bit more finicky than, say, a Mars. When you make your build plates bigger, they have more pill force, they have more flex in the vat, and they need a little bit stronger support or a little bit more balanced settings. And that's just universal. So if you're using a Mars or a Photon, or I forget what the enders are called, the normal 6-inch screen printers, you usually have an easier time. But the second you start going into medium format or large format resin printers, you'll want to beef your supports up just a little bit. In fact, when the Saturn first came out, like the Atlas crew were like, you might want to send that back. People are not enjoying their Saturns, and like now everybody prints on Saturns. It seems like.
Yeah, I love mine, but I do actually up my supports usually about by 20%. But I also use really fine supports. So
right. Indeed, and one of the things is like, so what a support, we never said what a support is. It's like a little pillar that just is like a little pillar that is sometimes like cross latticed up with other pillars that just takes a little tiny point and pokes the model to give it an anchor point to pull and build the rest of the model of. And then in ideal circumstances, they just sort of peel off of the model when you're done, and you can just remove them super easy.
Yeah, they kind of look like little scaffoldings.
And when you're doing your supports, you in any either pre-made or you are doing them yourselves, you want to have enough supports to make sure the model prints successfully. But every place a support touches the model is a chance that it will scar the model or leave a little divot or a little peg when it breaks off when you remove the supports.
Spike.
Yeah, that you have to then sand off and stuff. And you want as few of those as possible. And when they're done strategically and done well, like they're placed at just the right points and they're light enough in all the right places that you yank those supports off and the model looks absolutely flawless. And I love getting those professional supports done from like I said, Titan Forge or Archville Games. I just yank those support files off. They melt away in hot water and the model just looks flawless. And I don't need to do any finishing work on it whatsoever.
Yep. I have had many beautiful figs that I have primed and got everything ready, and I turn it and I'm like, oh, there's a little teeny like thing of support that was fused on there and I missed it. Like,
yeah.
Do I have to like crack that off or whatever? But yeah, so just it can be wily. That's one of the downsides of using the really fine ones like I use, because it can be very hard to distinguish. I don't know, like if you're doing a big ice dragon or whatever, like when they have all these little spiky bits. Sometimes they prime up just fine. You can dry brush them and it looks like an icy thing, but anybody with a discerning eye is going to recognize what happened there and go kind of. So
before you do anything working with supports at all, you need to tune your printer. And what that means is just dialing in your lift speeds and your resin speeds on your printer so that you're getting the best quality and success rate for your prints. And the way you can do that is by doing these test prints. There's lots of test prints off there. One of my favorites is the Amerilab Test Town, which is the one that the Atlas crew recommends a lot. And it's just this little file that has like very difficult to print parts on it. You usually do have to clean your vat after you do a test because it's designed to eventually, some of it will fail on most of the cases. And use like, as long as 3 rows of pins appear on this, then you've tuned your printer tight enough that it will print these supported files well, and you'll get good looking prints. And so there's various different test files out there. I like the Amerilab's test file best myself, and it will tell you if you're overexposing, underexposing, if your lift speeds are too high. Like the crown jewel achievement is printing that tiny little spike on the end of the Seattle Tower that's in the town. If that spike shows up, you know you've done it right.
I think
Unless
the
you've
first time I ever
overexposed.
printed it, I got it, and then I haven't got
Nice.
it since.
No. Yeah. And one of the things I do like to do is I print one in the center and then one in each corner. So I
Oh,
can
smart.
tell. Yeah. So if I can tell if my printer has a weak light somewhere or an area that I need to pay more attention to.
Might also tell you if your FEP is getting too cloudy.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, because mine's starting to look pretty battle scarred. Hasn't perforated yet, though. I'm still on my first one from the Saturn that I got. It's crazy. Anyway.
Yeah. And hey, replacing FEPs is the thing I hate most doing when I'm maintaining my printer, but it's the thing you got to do from time to time. And with the Saturn, I find I have to do it a lot more than I ever had to do the Mars, because again, more flex in that FEP means you're wearing through it a little bit faster. You've not had to do it yet?
No.
Not on the Saturn?
No, not once. Not yet. Like I said, it's starting to look pretty grisly. It's starting to look like an old war vet.
It's best to do it early instead of late. Like, you should probably do it now.
Okay. We'll talk about that later.
I want to do an episode on maintenance for printers, and just like the basic things you need to do and how to do them well. And maybe wait for that episode, and then I'll tell you all the tricks I've learned to make it the least amount of annoying as possible.
Yes. And until then, use a screen protector.
Absolutely.
I missed saying that last episode. I'm going to try to say that every episode.
I don't know that we need to say it every episode, but this is super important too.
Every time I go and see my sad Anycubic.
Oh no.
I remember.
So we've talked about pre-supports and why you would want to support. Now, do keep in mind, if you resize the file, you need to resupport it. There are ways, or alter the supports, as Brett in chat said, because Slachi software, which I like, is my personal favorite to go to, does let you very easily scale up and scale down the supports and beef them up or shrink them down. It's a great way to do it. And if you are customizing the files at all, or hey, maybe you just want to support it yourself and you don't trust the supports that they give you, or your printer's like temperamental, or you're having problems with your printer, so I need extra supports on that staff or it's never going to print. That's a valid reason.
Bases.
I do so much.
Always bases for me.
Oh yeah, bases are a fun. Bases are their own style of supports. Like the advice I'm about to give on how to support models in general are on their own. When you're supporting something like bases or dice, they have a very special way of supporting them that works very well and is very tedious.
Yes. Or very resin intensive if you just go nuts with like an easier solution.
So also, I do want to say there are models that don't need supports. If the model will say it's supportless, like I know Rocket Pig does a lot of supportless models.
I was about to mention that.
Yeah. Bright Miniatures. Bright Miniatures are my favorite. My first miniature I ever printed was a Bright Miniatures Dwarf Fighter, just to test the brand new resin printer. And Bright Miniatures does great, very old school style supportless miniatures. Everything from Fat Dragon Games, supportless.
Very cool. I have noticed that there is, at least for minis, I know a lot of terrain supportless is totally fine.
Right.
But you'll see that there's certain things that happen to posing of figs because they're avoiding those down hanging pieces. And as long as you're cool with it, I don't know if people saw the ice phoenixes I did. Was that 2 weeks ago? Those were actually from Rocket Pig.
Nice.
And they would have printed just fine. And I actually have printed one with 0 supports. I turned them on their sides because I wanted to do a faster print plate. So I did end up supporting them. And that's something to know. If you get a supportless fig, it has to be printed in the orientation it is given to you. If you turn it or do something weird to it, you're going to have to support that. And that's not the creator's fault. So
also, supportless miniatures print a lot easier on FDM printers. And in fact, were most originally supportless miniatures were created because FDM printing supports are a bit more of a nightmare than resin printing supports. What we're going to be talking about today is mostly for resin printing supports. FDM is its own beast, but also FDM supports are kind of auto fire and set it and forget a lot of ways. You usually don't have to worry about it too much. Your slicers do a good job with FDMs, and your slicers do a good job overkilling and making sure things will support correctly in FDM. Also, FDM is a little bit easier because you don't have to deal with peel force. It's its own topic. It's its own thing. FDM supports are their own thing, but that's one of the reasons that so much terrain is supportless. Is FDM is also a pain in the butt to remove their supports and then clean it and get a good finish on it. So that's why supportless and FDM are such great friends, and why I love Lovecraft's models so much for printing, because no supports on any Lovecraft stuff, and I can just throw it in my Neptune and I know I'm going to get a cool looking model at the end of that.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. So it's time to support.
Show and tell?
Yeah, it's time to show and tell. It's time to support your models. So when you're supporting models, you have to pick your slicer, and there are a few different popular slicers out there. The one that most people use with resin printers, and the one that a lot of people have to now that some printers are locked to it, is Chitubox. But it's important to note that you don't have to support the models in the same slicer that you print them in. And in fact, I don't. So even though I do use Chitubox to ultimately slice my models, I will support them in Lychee or Prusa Slicer instead, because I find that their support software is a lot better, especially auto supports. Right now, Lychee is my favorite. So there's Prusa Slicer, there's Lychee Slicer, and there's Chitubox. And Chitubox used to be absolutely horrible with their auto supports, where it would just overkill and also miss islands, and there would be print fails with their auto supports.
Mm-hmm.
And Prusa Slicer at the time was just much better. Its auto supports would almost always result in a printable mini. And then Lychee came out, and Lychee just kind of is the best. Lychee software, in my opinion, right now is definitely the best slicer to go to for supporting models. And then what you do is you export that supported model as an STL file that includes the supports attached, and then you can just open that in whatever slicer you have to use to print the model and send it to your printer. So I will support models in Lychee, export them as STL files, and then throw them to Chitubox to print.
For people who are, viewing, listening, that are pretty new, what of those softwares cost anything?
So all of those softwares have free versions. So Prusa is I think just straight up free and open source. Lychee has a free version and a paid version that is a few bucks a year. And Chitubox is expensive per year for the pro version, but has a free version. And I pay for the pro version of Lychee, though I barely use the pro feature, so I probably would have been fine with the free version of Lychee. Okay. And I haven't tried out Chitubox's pro software at all, so I can't speak to that.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Trying to parse. Alex says best FDM supports in FDM with Cura tree supports for overhangs and new lightning internal supports.
Okay, so lightning supports are something I did want to talk about with FDM, and I will talk about that after in a bit.
Okay,
but
we're
it's
going to stick with resin
style of internal supports that is as an alternative to infill.
Cool. Well, we'll talk about that after you show up for your resin stuff. Got it.
But thanks for reminding me about that, Alex. That is wonderful. All right, so I'm going to pull up my Lychee software right now, and I'm going to show how I support a model. Okay.
Go big.
All right, so I've got this model, and to credit it, this is from the Sea Guard from Last Sword, and it's I customized this one a little bit. I put a different head on it than it was normally supposed to use. This is a head from their Spearman set, but it's lying on its back, and this isn't how I want to print it, because I want to get optimal quality out of this mini. I want the supports to mostly be at its back, because the front is what I want to protect. And also, I want those supports to go up into overhangs and protect it. And I learned most of everything I'm about to tell you by watching 3D Printing Pros videos, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the model, and I'm going to rotate it so that it's mostly standing up, but tilted back on its back about 15 to 30 degrees.
Okay.
All right. And that is there. And now I'm not going to do manual supports much because I'm really bad at doing manual supports. I don't like to do it. And what I do is I auto support to get started, and then I will edit those auto supports. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to make
Wow,
sure
was that fast? Really? Did that, like, I saw the contact points are already there, right? Like,
no, they're not there yet.
Oh, they're not there, still rendering? Okay.
No, I haven't hit the button yet. I just switched over to the prepare mode.
Or does it just highlight downward facing surfaces first?
Oh, this is just the down. This is all the
okay.
places that will need some sort of support, either because they're
I like that,
islands
though.
or
That's
because they
slick.
have weight.
That is very visual, and I'm a fan of that. I dig it.
Right. And they have a great the one of the things I like about Lachi is they will show you the islands on the model. If you want to do manual supports, it'll show you all the places that absolutely need a support because they will float in midair otherwise. But I'm going to start by generating auto supports. I go to light supports. I'm using the default support here. I know that lots of people like to dial these down even lighter. But for me, I find that Lachi's light supports are enough for me. But hey, your mileage might vary. I'm going to generate my auto supports. And what that is going to do is it's going to look for the islands and weights and give me this little report that tells me, hey, I found this support. There was an island that it wasn't able to find a good place to support to. So I'm going to have to manually go and put that support in. And it just does its best job and tells me, like, hey, I made this many supports. And I get a model that is got all these contact points.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are those the actual thickness of the supports?
No. Okay. I have it
That's
showing,
just like the physics of it. Yeah. Okay.
This is what it will actually look like. Yeah.
Got it. That's cool, though, that it can just show you what the geometry looks like. That's neat. And then it doesn't include the internal stuff, which is probably important, placing your own stuff, right?
So in Lachi, you have the option to go to visibility and go to contacts. So once you tilt the model back, you add the auto supports. It's going to mostly like tuck them up in places you don't care. Then I add a few medium supports. So what I'll do is I'll put a support down and I'll make it medium. And I'll put a bunch of medium supports where I know there's going to be weight added.
Yeah, that tracks.
So like underneath the foot, this guy's standing on a rock. So I'll throw it on the rock. And I'll go like the tip of that sword, the bottom of this bow, the tip of his quiver, things that are just pointing straight down. I'll make sure get medium supports. And I know the elbows, because elbows have a lot of weight attached to them, I'll make sure they get medium supports. Then I'm going to go to islands. And Lachi software has an island detector. It'll show you exactly where islands are on the model. And then like when you, this says it found 5 islands. So 5 places that absolutely positively 100% need a support, and it will highlight them in red. So I know that there's one right here under his armor. I'll put a light support there. This finger needs a one. I'll put one there. The sash needs one. I'll put one there, and so on. Like under here. Ooh, that's going to be a tricky one to get to. I can see why it didn't do it. Put one there. And then when I can't find it on my own, I can hit show and it'll just like manually point me right at it. And I think there you go. Boom. All those things are supported. I'll then go over to manual mode and say parent. And what this will do is it'll just like merge ones together and then add bracings so that the supports support each other and they'll print more successfully.
Okay.
Finally, I like to add a raft. I use the shape raft because it doesn't have any section force. And then I'm all done. And I'll take this model and I'll just export it as an STL file. Save it. And then I can open it up in my software and I'm good to go for printing.
Wow, that like disarmed some serious anxiety and fear about this program for me. So thank you.
Yeah,
I would highly recommend, if you're listening to this, go watch the video on the Facebook page later, or YouTube, or somewhere.
Yeah, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter.
There you go.
Yeah, but there are lots of, like, 3D Printing Pro does a fantastic set of videos on doing supports in various software. There's lots of tutorials on supporting in Lachi and stuff, but that's how my workflow. I like to start with auto supports and then manually look for places that need to support, and then look to see if I see things that need some more weight, and then it's done. It's not huge. And then there is Prussia, which is much the same way. Its auto supports don't have as many cool settings as Lychee does. Also,
Right.
everything I just did in Lychee and showed off is available in their free version. Like I
Okay.
didn't even get to the pro features, which you can like manually make the pole go up, and then it branches off 5 ways into a fan of tiny supports along the arm and all kinds of cool stuff like that.
Very cool. And just as a brief aside to newer hobbyists that are listening to this or seeing it, I've used Cheeto Box and it was terrible when I first started using it, and it's pretty darn good now. So like, don't feel bad if you're not like digging into all this quite yet. But that looks a lot more like, a lot less intimidating now that I saw you do it. Just seeing you do it for me was huge. So thank you.
Right. And I guess I understand that the new Cheeto Box support since they made the changes, is very similar to what I just did in Lychee. And that's how I support my models and do custom supports. And then I do a test print. Like, what you shouldn't do is assume that support's going to work and then print 24 of them at once on the big build plate. You shouldn't do that. I've done it. I've lost an entire print tray's worth of resin that way. Then I had to clean it up. So what I like to do is I just put a small batch on the print, run the print once to make sure it works, and then I start my mass production. Obviously, on one-off miniatures, this isn't a big deal.
Right.
But yeah.
You could, put it on the side of something less critical. Like, I don't know. Sometimes I'll do that when I'm doing a test print. I'll just put on the side of something like bases that might fail anyway or whatever, and just make it a high risk plate for me.
Right. And then ultimately, getting your supports right and testing them is just part of the process, and it's something you're going to learn the more you do it. That when there's more model, it needs more support to counteract I like to say weight, but it's really the peel force, the how much suction it needs to jerk off that build plate. And so you need to have more supports and stronger supports when it's a bigger mass that it needs to hold up.
Right. I was surprised how well that my dragon, it was only a few sections and it was pretty heavy, and it still hung on there just fine with the supports that I did.
Right. And also, like, hollowing models, as long as you have drainage holes to allow resin to get in and out and keep suction from happening, really alleviates a lot of that peel force that you need to work with, and it will work better.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Did you want to circle back to that lightning support thing for FDM?
All right. So on FDM, they do have Sakura, which is one of the more popular FDM printing softwares out there, supports things like tree supports, which look a lot like resin supports. It's kind of resin style supports for models, because the default supports is just put a giant zigzag of material, a whole wall of material up that is designed to peel off the model and flood the model with this stuff, and it will absolutely print 100% that way, and you don't need to worry about it. But man, cleanup is a beast. You have to get in there with pliers and like yank them out, and then you have to sand the areas to get rid of some of the scarring that's left behind. It's a bit much. So tree supports are resin style. So you have these like tiny little tree-like structures that just barely touch where it needs to be supported, instead of having to support like everything and just hope it gets it. And it's a better style of supports as long as your printer is tuned in for it. That works, and that's for overhangs and downward facing objects and things like that. And Cura does a good job of calculating that. And again, FDM printers have a little bit of an easier time because they're only trying to overcome gravity, not suction peel force, which takes a little bit more calculations. Though if the Heatree Rocket 1 and more printers start to come out that style, then we have to rethink the concept, and it'll be a lot more like FDM supports with less requirements that way. And then the new style, which I was almost added to the news last week and I forgot, is lightning supports, which when you're printing a solid object in FDM, you don't print You can, but it's you can print it as like just solid chunk of plastic where you fill in every single gap. But that's wasteful of materials and takes a lot of time.
Yep.
You don't really need to have this like this container here. I print with 10% infill, so 10% of this is plastic on the inside, and the rest are just air pockets. It prints a like a honeycomb pattern all the way through it, and to just give it some structural support. And that's to keep like the top from sagging in, and to
Right.
make sure that there's something to print on when it gets time to print the layers above it. But that's wasteful because I don't need all that material. So something has been created called lightning supports, and it's a lot like tree supports on the inside of the model. So it just like less supports at the bottom, and then just they call it lightning because it looks like internal lightning bolts just expanding up into the model to cover the parts that need to be supported, but not waste plastic supporting nothing. It just calculates, okay, I'm going to need supports here, 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 and here, and along this wall. And it just makes a little tree or a little lightning bolt on the inside of the model, uses drastically less material. It will take a lot faster to print because you're not wasting time printing material that serves no purpose. And for most modeling purposes is fine. Like just the walls of this are solid enough to make this container for what we need to use it for.
Like it'll support
work.
a mini or whatever,
Right.
and you can stack them.
Like I can take this thing and just bang it on the floor as hard as I can, and I'll bent the floor before I hurt the model. This thing's so strong with just normal infill. Now with lightning supports, they aren't that strong, but probably still pretty strong. Now you wouldn't want to use lightning supports on something like that you need some structural strength to, like tools or vices or like shelf hangers or things you're going to put a lot of weight on and they're going to actually need that structural strength. You're going to want actual infill. But for most of the stuff that we do, we're just making pretty castles and dungeons and spaceships and dragons. Lightning is the perfect answer. And honestly, it's what we do in resin right now anyway.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when you hollow something out in resin, you do want to run the auto supports on the inside as well to make sure that the inside has something. Because if it has a big if you printed it on its back and it's an ogre and it has a belly button and you hollowed it out, that belly button, because it's facing downwards from the point of view of inside the stomach, needs a support to hold it up.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And any questions about supports?
Yeah.
Any questions from the audience? Any more suggestions? Let us know. And we are going to be right back. We are going to talk about the news. And I usually transition, but I don't do the transitions on this show. So, hey, news! There's some cool news to talk about. And one of those is VROOM is go. A new video came out from 3D Printing Pro, who I've referenced a lot in this podcast, where he has tested the VROOM settings for a solid year. When VROOM first came out, for those of you who do not know, what VROOM is the idea that for a long time when we were doing resin printing, in order to make sure the supports would hang and we were printing successfully, we would slow the printer down so that it was peeling up the layers very softly and gently. And so we would expose at just the right exposure time and then very slowly peel that off the plate so that we wouldn't damage it and the supports would hold and everything would be great. And then somebody got a great idea. Why don't we just rip the Band-Aid off?
Yep.
Instead of going low and slow, go as fast as possible and just pop that print right off the pill plate. And when this was first coming out and on the Atlas support forums, when they were talking about it, I jumped on board with that immediately because I was having trouble with my Saturn. And then they found out that VROOM, especially on the medium formats and the large format printers, is the absolute perfect answer. So instead of like a lift speed of 35 or 40, I go 240.
Yeah. And you convinced me to do it, and I've been doing it for 5 months, and it's so much better for me.
Yeah, it just rips the Band-Aid off, as I like to say. It pops that layer off super fast. It has the side effect I do it because it makes more reliable prints. I can use lighter supports. I get much crispier looking models, more successful prints than I would of trying to do it low and slow. And doing the VROOM settings is great, but a lot of people are worried, like, is this going to wear out the FEP a lot faster? Is this going to be bad on the motors? Is this going to affect the screen? Like, the printers weren't designed to do vrooming. This is something that was discovered after many of these printers were made. And even the printing manufacturers were like, we don't know. We never thought to do this. We never tested it at these speeds before. And so the answer was to give it a shot. And I've had nothing but success. I've been doing it for over a year myself on my printer, and I've never had a problem with it. And so 3D Printing Pro has been doing it on all their printers and monitoring how fast they're burning through the materials, replacements, and all that stuff. And apparently, VROOM is go. There's no obvious downsides. There's no problems. It doesn't seem to be any less reliable than low and slow, and it's not causing damage to the FEP any faster than the same number of prints would do it. Like, go watch the video for their full-on explanation. But I'm glad to hear that, because now I can just unequivocally recommend VROOM settings to everybody who gets into printing. I do recommend you do VROOM. My sweet spot is 240. Uncle Jesse put up a video a couple of months ago where they were VROOMing as fast as 600 lift speed, but they had to edit the firmware to go that high.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, but the one thing that video did show is that it dropped off on speed gain after about 300. I do know that most people, 240 seems to be the sweet spot for most people, so that's what I recommend. But try out what you want on your printer, as long as you're safe, what you feel safe about. Because again, they weren't designed to do this, but it seems that they do it just fine. So I do recommend giving it a shot or looking into it. We'll have some links in the show notes to the videos we're talking about. But I love VROOMing. I'm glad to hear that the tests have come back and there's no giant warning like, no, don't VROOM ever. You cut the lifespan of your printer in half. No,
right.
It looks like these printers
just
can handle
fine.
it.
Yep. I think Kevin Reed in Facebook chat has provided you your next segue.
The video is difficult to watch because of his audio.
That's Brett. Next one. It's about my mini factory. So.
Oh, sorry. Kevin Reed. No, I've shown up late, but y'all mentioned the My Manufacturing sale. No, we have not mentioned it. It's on the list. Yeah, it was. Yeah. So, hey, My Manufacturing is having their winter sale, which seems to be almost identical to their Black Friday sale. My Manufacturing has lots of sales, but they're always good. So right now you can pick up models from My Manufacturing from just about everybody for 50%, 30%, lots of good deep discounts. It's a great time to fill in your back catalog and buy some stuff.
And I will always throw in, double check their Patreon page. It's possible that they're even doing a deeper one for their patrons. So
yeah, if you're pledged to people, make sure your code isn't automatically better than their code every day of the week.
However, it goes
sometimes true.
It does go the opposite way though. Sometimes there is defaults that are just 20 or 40 or 30 or whatever. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that 51 or whatever it is on My Manufacturing is also better. You're going to have to check.
Or Artisan Guild, where you have a good discount, but it's only good for the first 10 days of the month.
Cool. Dave says he'll definitely be tuning in again. Yeah, no, definitely, Dave. And feel free to ping us with questions so we can specifically address them. Cool. Yeah, My Manufacturing though. Back to Kevin. That sale is decimating my wallet. So
yeah, thankfully, it isn't hitting my wallet as bad, but for all the wrong reasons. Because it's I have most of these models. I don't need to buy them again.
That makes me feel slightly better about my horrible addiction.
Yeah. All right. So that is a little bit of news. Other bit of news is Elegoo has announced a new version of the Saturn coming out. Did we all waste our money on our existing Saturns? Not really. The new Saturn is the Elegoo Saturn S, which is a half step upgrade. They like to do these S models before they make the numbers go up. So this isn't the Elegoo Saturn 2, it's the Elegoo Saturn S. And it's there's the Mars 2 and the Mars 2 Pro, and there was the Mars and the Mars S. And
so is the S, how is it better?
So the S has a slightly bigger screen. It has a 9.1-inch screen instead of an 8.9-inch screen, though it is still a 4K resolution. It is not a Saturn 6K. If it was a Saturn 6K, I'd be excited right now.
Yeah.
It also has plug-in air filters built into the thing now. So right now, if you remember with the Elegoo Saturn, they have those little air filters that you can just sort of sit inside there. They have like a built-in air filter that you can just plug right into it. It's nice. It's a cool feature. And other than that, not a lot new or exciting. So slightly bigger build volume is nice. Plug-in air filters is nice.
So how much more is it?
Not announced.
Okay. Well, I will also point out, since it isn't a massive upgrade, watch the price on the other Saturns now. It's probably going to be a good chance to upgrade if you've been using a Mars or something.
I would say that, but definitely do. But the problem with the Saturns wasn't what price they are. It's, can you even get one? Because
that is getting better, though.
It is now getting easier. And I've seen Saturns on sale for as low as $400. And it's still a great printer. I do recommend. I do know that when we did our getting into it show, I said don't get a Saturn as your first printer, but absolutely consider getting a Saturn as your second and third and fourth and fifth and so on printers. When you know, once you've got your 3D printing legs and you've made those expensive early mistakes, the Saturn and the Anycubic Mono X are wonderful printers to go with, and they are absolutely, I think, the sweet spot for resin printing right now. Kevin in chat,
screen protector.
sorry. Yeah. Get a screen protector, because those screens are $200 a piece, and you don't want to do this.
And
Kevin says,
y'all
check out the Anycubic 6K on MMF for around $600. MMF has been sending me endless emails promoting this particular bundle they've got going.
Tribes exclusive one, right?
Yeah, the one with the custom colors and the little tribal sticker. It's a nice printer. The Anycubic Mono 6K, the Anycubic Mono X 6K is a wonderful printer. I do highly recommend it. $600 is a good price for that. I'm happy with my Saturn right now, but if anything happened to it, I would definitely consider the Anycubic 6K as what I'd replace it with.
Yeah, if I had a windfall, I'd pick it up, but I don't think right now I'm gonna drop it.
And I'm not quite at the place right now where I need multiple medium format printers in my household, but I could see myself getting there someday.
You know, I talked to somebody who's a hobbyist who got merchant licenses, and she made a really good argument. She is not full time, and she pulls in about $1,200 a month.
Nice.
Just doing side prints. And I was like, whoa, that's a nice punch in the arm. Pays for her hobbying and extra stuff. So
yeah, I've been considering doing that and going that direction for sure. But I've got enough side companies going right now. I
have no idea what you're talking about.
All right. Any other news?
No, I think that was our big three, right?
Yeah, that was our big three. All right, now time for the shout-outs. The things we enjoy, the things that aren't exactly newsworthy, but we do want you all to know about them. And we're going to start with Christmas nerds.
Christmas nerds. I'm just going to say it. If you're a big Christmas nerd, I am married to a big Christmas nerd, and he definitely wants me to check all that stuff out. But it's $100 pretty much. It's Raging Heroes / Heroes Infinite has a Wizard's Christmas. It is if you just want tons, and I mean tons, of holiday themed props, ornaments, and there's just so much. They added more this year. I was bringing it up because I missed it last year when it was a little bit less content, a little bit cheaper. But now it's just this massive pile of stuff. And again, if you're into props for your games, there's working opening snow globes. I think Param has one up on the screen right now. Anyway, but there's wands. There's tons of stuff if you're doing immersive gaming stuff. There's tons of stuff if you want to build a Christmas village of minis. There's tons of stuff. There's some cool like planar astrolabe things. I mean, there's so much. So worth checking out, but it is a high ticket. And normally I don't call out stuff that's this pricey, but if you're into it and this is your time of year, I'd say check it out.
Yeah, it looks great. It's not my jam, but I could absolutely see why many people would absolutely want to jump all over that for sure.
Kevin, I love the Battle Yak. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, a lot of the Patreons have some really good holiday sets, but that is a really cute one with the reindeer beastmen.
Awesome,
I like it.
So the one I want, my first shout out, I'm going to shout out to what I mentioned, kind of wanting to get into the 40K style gaming, trying to get my grimdark future on. So I want to shout out to Puppets War, who has an absolute amazing set of 3D printable models out that I just am blown away by. I kind of passed them up earlier because some of their earlier stuff was kind of more diorama stuff, but now they start putting out these modular kits of these like not quite Space Marines and not quite Tyrannid, and they got a great original style to them. They have really cool looking weapons. They're nice and chunky. They're fully modular, and those aliens, like, I'm a big fan of the one-page rules aliens, but these not Tyrannids and not Gene Stealers just look absolutely phenomenal and dynamic, and they're fully posable. They have ball sockets on the shoulder, so you can arrange those arms any way you want. This is just perfect for my sci-fi gaming goodness.
I have to say, there's one time that I got to say I scooped you. I've been on this since day one, and yeah, I 100% agree with everything. And the chess set thing is something they're just throwing out there too. He wanted just a little change up. That's really cool. But yeah, Puppets War is awesome. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, I did want to call out for as a special Christmas bonus, they have this cool Paladin chess set that just looks amazing, and like I kind of wish I'd caught this sooner because I have a few friends that this would have made the perfect Christmas present to make a Paladin chess set for them.
Yeah, and they can totally work if you want just like the big cool statues lining the Royal City entryway or whatever. Even if you're not in a chest, they're awesome pigs. Love it.
Right. Yeah. All right. And lastly, I want to call out a Patreon that I have really enjoyed for ages now, that have been producing great, mostly RPG focused style, and that is STL Minis. And I install for a second while I pull that up. Have you pledged them before?
I think I got some, like, just a pack from them, but I have been impressed by them. And this Archer set is interesting. It's super like narrowed in, but they did a really good job. I think you mentioned them being super expressive, and they're really fun.
So a lot of models either like try to mimic the grimdark style that that James Workshop is absolutely addicted to. Thanks, Alex, for mentioning James. But I do like the more stylized miniatures set, and so STL Miniatures does that. And this one, the one that got me in, is they have these cool centaurs, and like, these are pieces of art. Absolutely. Like, these would not be out of place in a Disney movie, but they don't have exaggerated chibi proportions. They still are more traditionally proportioned models, and they just elegant and expressive. They've got these jumping around poses. They don't just like, they're not posed to where they could rank and file for sure.
Right.
And so I've got this elf archer set. I think I know I was printing the Printing Goes Ever Onward elves for this purpose, but then I kind of saw these, and that's the danger of 3D printing anything, because the second you settle on something for a project, something better comes along, and you're just like, oh my gosh. And so with these,
but these elves, would make great hero figs for your army.
Oh, absolutely. Right? Well, I kind of need them for rank and file for my elite archers, not my rank and file archers, but like, I have a group called Gladestalkers in Kings of War, and these would be like the Shadow Warriors and Warhammer or something. Like, these are the absolute best of the best rangers that the elves have to offer. And so these super expressive, bouncing off trees and rocks elves are
Yeah.
exactly what I need. And they're available in tons of poses. They got a cool boat. They got an owl. I like the owl.
Also
And
worth throwing out there that like it's got a little bit of terrain with it that kind of looks kind of wowish. I'm just gonna say, if you were to combine it with the wood elf sets that Bite the Bullet did, you could probably build a pretty cool little WoW style night elf diorama if you wanted to.
Yeah. And indeed, one of the things that they do, traditionally their sets are more geared towards the role playing side of things, where there are multiple sets a month will have like a bunch of minis themed and then a bunch of terrain to do, like the evil cultist lair or the executioner's chamber or the circus performers.
Right.
And they're just really great. Good way to fill
candle
things
maker
out.
was pretty cool. I thought that was neat. Yeah, there he is.
Yeah. I got there's just like there's a printing press and a candle stand and a big old wax cauldron, and I love that they have all this stuff themed, and it definitely lends itself more towards the D&D style. Like, I need to set up a memorable encounter at a location, and this is exactly what you need. And also because like they're having fun, they don't look like miserable. The candle maker isn't covered in skulls and like hunched over and bleeding from a missing stump leg like some models would appear. And I do love that expressive, like whimsical style. Everything doesn't need to be the grimdark, though I do appreciate my Dark Soulsy and Warhammery grimdark as well. But you know, I like to change things up.
Kevin has called out both Blue Sky Minis and Gear Guts. I don't think I'm familiar with either of these, so I'm gonna have to go check them out.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with either of those, Kevin, but do want to check them out for sure. Absolutely.
Blue Sky says orcs.
All right. Any last shout outs for y'all?
Not for me. No, I think I'm good. He says Angels versus Tanks on Cults. I have not seen that either. I'll have to check it out, Kevin. Nope. But yeah, no, I just hopefully those of you who've already celebrated holidays have had a great time, and I know a lot of us have holidays coming up. If Christmas is your thing, have a great Christmas. I think we're just about done.
All right, everyone. And thank you again for another fantastic episode of Print Your Games. If you want to find more, you can find us at printyourgames.com. And you can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. We super appreciate it. If you want to support the show, make sure to share the podcast around. Give us 5 stars, likes on iTunes. Just sort of help get the word out. And also come in and join us when we film live on Tuesdays. We do so on all those platforms, and you can come in and chat and ask questions, as many people have during this show. That helps liven things up and also helps get the word out. Again, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and at printyourgames.com. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.